through 4.8. Now, we may get past 4.8 today. I don't know. I'm assuming that this is as far as we're going to go. So just really quickly to review. We talked about 3 purposes of human beings. Give me one.
Sexual knowledge.
Okay, sexual knowledge is one. That has to do with the 8 stot, tov, v'ra. Go ahead. Give me another one.
To work and take care of the
To work and take care of the earth. Genesis 2:15. Ovdah l'shomah. The third one, Miriam.
Wait, which thing are we on? Isn't it 324?
Yes, that's correct. That's exactly what Lily said.
So
What's the third purpose of human beings we haven't yet mentioned?
The chess pieces. Wait.
You're the one who volunteered, not me.
Take responsibility.
We'll get there in a second. Go ahead, please, Cooper.
To be fruitful.
To be fruitful and multiply. Now, the taking responsibility links into what Pauline said before in terms of once you acquire or are aware of sexual knowledge, is then using that responsibly. Now, yesterday, I talked about linking sexual knowledge and acting responsibly to what verse, to what concept?
Fruitful?
No. I mean, that's one possible outcome. Excuse me, Jeremy?
Can someone send me the notes?
Excuse me. Your classmate is talking. Go ahead, please.
Because we're treated in the image of God.
Okay. So one of the basic theological reason for acting responsibly is that each of us is created in God's image. So when we use our knowledge of any type and we interact with people, God bless you, this is hopefully a guiding principle, that if we see everybody creating God's image, we realize there's a way we can and should treat people, and there's a way or ways we should not treat people. Go ahead, Lillian, over to Miriam.
Should we write that down?
If you don't already have it down, because I think you wrote it down from yesterday's class, but if you didn't write it down, please write it down now. Go ahead, Miriam.
No, I was gonna ask.
That was it? Yeah.
So,
Guys, sometimes I'll review stuff we've done before just to reinforce it. If you already have it in your notes and you don't want to retake it, that's fine. But now we have to look at, so now we have the situation here, and I think we've gotten through the first 2 verses in chapter 4, where you have Adam and Eve, who now have this knowledge. They've been kicked out of the Garden of Eden. They can't go back. They can't go back to not knowing what they didn't know before. And so now, one of the first things that happens is Eve gets pregnant, and she gives birth to Cain and then Abel in short order. And I think Ari pointed out in class yesterday that means they must be twins. Okay? Now, notice please, what does it tell us in verse 2 in the text? All right, Pauline, here, go ahead. What does it tell us about the 2 brothers?
Then she continued giving birth to his brother Abel. Abel became a shepherd, while Cain tilled the soil.
Okay, they have 2 different skill sets. All right? Abel's a shepherd, means he takes care of animals. And Cain is a farmer. He tills the soil. I'm sorry, does anyone have a question so far? Yes, Ms.
Mine is a comment. I could be wrong, but isn't shepherd more specific to sheep?
Generally, yes, because I think the word shepherd comes from like sheep herd. It's like a combination word like holiday is from holy day. Okay?
What about shepherd?
That may have been the way they may have described the person at one point in history, but eventually those words became conflated.
Well, shepherd is easier to say.
Absolutely.
Shepherd is funnier to say.
It is, but maybe people weren't going for the laughs. So look at verse 3. Can I have a volunteer to read verse 3? Talia, start us off.
One day in the course of time, Cain brought some of his harvest as an offering to the Eternal.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, me, still
And
going.
verse 4.
And Abel too brought an offering from among the choice lambs of his flock and their fattest parts.
Okay, so we have...
Oh, the Eternal approved Abel and his offering.
All right, hold on a second. So Cain brings an offering, and Abel brings an offering. Now, in the text, is there any sort of adjectival description? Are there adjectives used to describe Cain's offering? Look at the text. Are there adjectives being used to describe Cain's offering? Miriam?
Yeah.
No. I'm sorry, Art, do you see an adjective being used?
Yeah, some of his harvest. It says.
But that's a description of how much as opposed to describing the stuff itself.
Yeah, that's all it really says.
Okay, so again, let's put that down. That may be significant, it may not be significant. There are no adjectives being used here. How about an Abel's offering? Ari?
The choice, an offering from among the choice lambs of his flock and their fattest parts.
Okay. Now fattest is is a, I think it's called a superlative, yes? Because it means it must be more than one. If it's one, if there are two comparing, it's fatter. If it's the most among two or more than two, it's fattest. Go ahead, please, Mary.
What does the choice lamb?
In other words, the best.
The best.
So just say the adjective would have been.
The adjective is, he's choosing the best, the choice. So let's put best in parentheses if choice is confusing. What do you think you could possibly interpret by the fact that Cain's offering has no adjectives describing it, whereas Abel's offerings does have an adjective? Talia?
Abel put more effort into picking the best.
All right.
But
So-
also, one reason God liked Abel's offering more might be because meat was like everyone's favorite food back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second.
I have a feeling
All right, hold on a
meat
second.
was
Now,
probably preferred over what did he get? Just
Now,
food.
I want to make a quick statement. This is not about being a carnivore, eating meat, versus being a vegetarian. But if we're going to put ourselves into the mindset of people back to this point in history, it may have been that an offering of meat was considered more desirable than an offering of grain. That's a possibility. We don't know for positive, it's a possibility. Miriam, then over to Cooper,
Well,
then over to
a
Ari.
couple things. First
Yes, and then Jeremy, I'm sorry.
is that verse 6 goes on to say that God didn't like kings.
I
But,
understand, we
but the
haven't
other
gotten there
thing-
yet.
Yeah, I know. But the other thing is,
Yes.
for God, I don't think that like meat being more like better would really matter because he's a soil person. So like God would like do what like he'd be okay with if that. But then if he didn't like it, it would mean that like obviously King didn't put as much effort into giving him the best like fruit.
Okay. So Miriam just points something out. Either God is prejudiced against grain offerings versus meat offerings, which seems kind of unfair to Cain. I mean, it's like Cain can't win. If God doesn't like grain offerings at all, Cain's really nailed.
But God is like, I think God would be like what
So,
each person can do.
all right. So under the assumption that you're suggesting that God will be acceptable, God will be happy with if we do our best, maybe the fact that there's no adjectives describing Cain's sacrifice is significant. Cooper, Ari, Jeremy, and then Lily. Go ahead, please.
I mean, I get the thing about there being like maybe Abel put more effort because Cain's has no adjectives, but still, I think that harvesting like
Crops.
can still be just as much effort as getting the meat. I don't just because meat might have like maybe best parts, whereas maybe crops are just gonna be maybe they all just came out the same, so there weren't like better ones. Like I don't think he necessarily wasn't trying not as hard
All right.
to give God something good. Just
So you're making the assumption that in order to till the soil and harvest stuff, it does take a lot of effort. Maybe more, or maybe the same effort as for Abel to offer, to take an animal and sacrifice it and offer it to God. So it may not be a comment on the effort put in. It could be possibly, we're not sure, it could be saying something or not saying something about the quality of what was offered. Okay? I think I said Ari was next, and then over to Jeremy's on deck, and then in the hole. Go ahead.
So I think I had one thing, but now I just have another one based off what Cooper said with
Please.
effort. So I think it's definitely because with Abel, what he has to do is like raise the animals, I guess, and then kill the ones that he thinks would make the best offering to God. Cain has to like till and plow the fields, plant the stuff, like make sure they're all healthy throughout the whole thing, and then
Yeah.
and growing, and then at the end harvest them all. So I think there is a lot more effort on Cain's part.
All right. So
I think that does
okay.
tie in to what Talia said a bit, but also maybe it could just be God's testing them to see how they'd react.
Hold on to that thought. I mean, I think we've now had two people talk about the effort Cain had to put in even to get the sacrifice to this point. Let me write the word reaction and keep that in your back pocket because we're going to come back to that. Okay, Jeremy, you were up
No, I
next.
have
Lily.
a second thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. My
The
apologies.
second thing is
Yeah.
I think that it's kind of unfair to say that Abel's is better, considering he was kind of a copycat, because Cain was the one who actually made an offering, and then after seeing that, Abel did.
Oh, interesting. So it may have been, Cain may have given the first offering, and Abel says, oh, I want to get in on this. I'm going to get an offering too. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like the kind of attitude like God likes.
All right, thank you very much. Go ahead, Lily. I'm sorry, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, if there are no adjectives, it kind of suggests that it's insignificant. It's not,
All right,
not
so
much.
so one possible interpretation you're suggesting, Jeremy,
Right.
is if there are no adjectives, it's, you know, insignificant. It's like, run of the mill, it's average, ordinary. Right? Let me put down ordinary. Now again, we don't know this for a fact, but one could make a reasonable interpretation like that. Lily, now it's your turn.
Okay.
All right,
So like to
I'm
add
gonna
on to
swing
what
back this way. Go ahead.
Miriam said before about like how like God might have been like favoring Abel and all. Since Abel's doing all the soil work and all, it's kind of like help like keep the world like in a good.
No,
What do you
Cain's
mean
doing
Cain?
Yeah.
All right. So in other words, Cain's doing something. Let's go back for a second. Remember that phrase that Talia reminded us of before. You know, La'ovdal L'Shomra. Of the two brothers, it's Cain is the one who is taking care of the earth and using the earth.
And it's like the world that God made.
Interesting. So you're suggesting, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's as if Cain is doing something closer to God's original intention about taking care of the earth.
In some sort of way.
In some sort of way. Thank you, I appreciate that. Eli, and then let's swing back to Talia and Miriam.
Literally, Cain's is extraordinary, while Abel's is extraordinary, if you look at it that way.
Okay. Give me a second because I want you to help me fully understand how you broke this down. You're saying his is extraordinary, whereas Abel's is extraordinary. Now, it's really, it's the two, you're using the two same words, but you're using them in a different way. So, Eli, help me understand where your thinking is going on this one.
I mean, we're already saying that one's ordinary, so we're just saying that's ordinary, and then that one's extraordinary.
Okay.
And it's better than ordinary.
All right, so you're emphasizing in this extraordinary. Cain was doing something above and beyond, but it was still kind of ordinary. But you're saying, well, this one extraordinary, well, wow, is really something. Am I understanding you correctly? Okay, thank you. Talia and then Miriam, you're on deck. And then we're going to need to move on beyond this.
Well,
What about me?
just to
What?
clarify,
I'm sorry,
'cause
excuse me. You have another one? I'll come back to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I'm sorry, Talia.
Did you have something to say?
No, it's
No,
after.
no,
I just said
it'll be
you're
after
done.
Miriam. Go ahead.
Just to clarify, because I'm
Please.
Abel's the one who gave God the meat,
Yeah.
and he's the one who's offering God light.
And I'm sorry, he's the one who's offering God.
Light.
Light?
More.
Yes, God liked Abel's
Yeah.
offering. God accepted
Okay.
it, but not Cain's. Go ahead.
Okay, just because I didn't understand.
Okay, so that.
Okay, anyway, Ari said that Cain had to put in a lot of effort to get the offering there. So did Abel. He had to watch them. He had to feed them. He had to give them water. He had to make sure they didn't get eaten. He had to make sure they didn't run off. Like, he had to raise them. So,
Let me suggest something. Does anyone remember the Hebrew word for sacrifice?
That was like
Korban.
Korban. Alright? The Hebrew korban comes from the Shorish.
No.
What?
I was gonna say it.
Oh, go ahead, say it.
Karov. Which
Kar-
means close.
Means close. No, the assumption of a korban is it brings you close to God. Now, if I use the word sacrifice in English, what idea, what notions does that bring up in your head?
Cannibalism.
Excuse me. Miriam, you want to offer a thought on that?
Wait, can I just say
No,
something?
no.
else?
Give me a second. I want to finish off that, but I want to
say it
before I come
again.
back to you.
So say what you, the
Okay.
question was.
When we use the word sacrifice in English, I mean, what ideas, what concepts does that bring up? When you sacrifice something, when you do a sacrifice bunt in baseball, what does that mean? You want to try it, Mary?
Well,
I know a lot of people know it.
like you, like, give it up.
There's a giving up.
Okay, but can I say the other thing?
Okay, hold on a second. There's a giving up of something. And the assumption of, as Ty said before, karab, it somehow either brings you closer to God. You give up something of yours, of yourself, and somehow or other that brings you closer to God. We're going to come back to this concept. Now, Miriam, it was your turn next,
so
then over
a
to
couple
Ari, and then over to
things.
Pauline. Go
Couple
ahead.
things. First is the thing of the effort. I don't think that it's really like more of the effort. It's because I think in this up to the effort, it's kind of equal. But then once you get to like, let's say like picking it, like it says, oh, he chose the fattiest part, or like also it could have.
I'm going to have to go to the next page, guys.
Like
I'm
they
sorry.
didn't say anything about Cain's, but I'm pretty sure it's like a Midrash that says like, oh, his like wasn't the best one. It might have been like a little like this isn't this, but just like example like a little wilted or whatever, or not. I don't know.
No, I know what I understand what you're saying.
But,
You're saying that the effort between, I mean, both of them had to put in a lot of effort to produce their sacrifice.
and also yeah, so like because like instead of Abel giving him like the worst or like I
Right.
don't know, or like because he might have given whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying it doesn't seem to be an issue of discrepancy of effort between the two of them, but maybe the quality of what in fact was offered. Not the effort that produced it, but the result of it. Ari, you were up next, and then Pauline's hand was up.
Yeah, so now that like when I actually read the text and we were talking about this, and I thought of something.
Sure.
In a way, Cain is actually responsible for both offerings because
How so? Go ahead.
in order for Abel to grow all those animals, he needs to feed them something. And I think we can assume he's not feeding them meat.
Okay, fair enough.
So he might very well be feeding some of them things that Cain harvests.
So
Grass.
Cain has a role in both sacrifices.
But Abel doesn't.
And then just to run up to the comment that Miriam brought to our attention before in verse 6, what's going to be the result of both of those sacrifices being offered?
He doesn't like.
God doesn't like which sacrifice?
Cain's.
Okay, now think for a moment, just for a
That's
moment,
just rude.
but before I go to
So in a
Pauline.
way, he really is liking Cain's sacrifice.
Alright, so think for a
Because Cain, no,
but-
wait, can I
but
say
wait.
They work together.
I'm sorry, Ari, go ahead. Finish your point.
For all we know, Cain might have had less vegetables than he wanted, than he would have liked, and as such not been able to sacrifice as many, just because he had to give to
Oh,
Abel.
wow.
But couldn't
Keep
it
the
have
sheep
been
alive.
the
God
same
just
with
have
lambs?
taken both.
But
Okay,
couldn't
hold
it
on a
have been
second.
the same with lambs? It could have been
No, he didn't.
just the same with lambs
No,
though
he
because
didn't.
lambs could not be born.
Alright, wait, hold on a second. Wait, Pauline, I promise I get you and I will get to you, okay? So look for a second. Cain has some role in both these sacrifices. I mean, look, sheep can sometimes eat from crops, or sheep can graze on vegetation. But it seems that Cain may well have had a role in both sacrifices. Because Miriam points out to us, I think it's in verse 6, God favors Abel's sacrifice. So one thing to keep in the back of your mind before I call upon Pauline, ask yourself, how might Cain be feeling given this statement that Ari made? Cain took part in, really in some way, in both sacrifices, and God still doesn't like his sacrifice. Yet his brother, who offered admittedly the best of what he had to do, of what he had to give, was accepted. So, wait, all right, hold on. All right, I gotta take it down a second. Think for a second about how Cain might be reacting to this. Now, Pauline, it was your turn. Ari,
Something to add on to what I said before.
All right, quickly add it on, Ari, because I want to get.
So I want to say, because also,
Thank you,
for all we know, Abel's sheep might have had that availability to have such quality sheep, because Cain gave him the quality crop.
Okay, so again, we're talking here about a role Cain may have played in making these sacrifices possible, yet even with all of that, God's still not liking the sacrifice. Pauline, it's your turn, please.
Finally. So that what Tyler said about taking care of the sheep,
Sure.
you also have to make sure that the sheep got pregnant and gave birth, because if they didn't, then there would be no sheep. And
Okay.
then if they died,
Go ahead. No, Pauline, keep on going. Keep
That's
on
a
going.
lot of effort.
You haven't said anything that's incorrect
if
biologically.
he had to
Yes, Pauline.
Pauline, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm
if he
listening.
had to help them through labor, because
Get to it.
they're laughing at me, because he didn't want them to die in lamb birth.
Of
So-
course.
So and then yeah.
Okay. No, absolutely
so
true.
he had to have kids, and then he had to protect the kids from all the big bad wolves that Peter cried. I mean,
I think you may be mixing metaphors here, but I understand what you're saying. It's not just helping give birth to the sheep. It's raising them and protecting them.
and he had to make sure that the sheep had enough milk for them.
Right. No, absolutely. All right. After Cooper's comment, I'm going to have to stop this here for a second and move on to the next verse. Go ahead, Cooper.
Okay, so 2 things. The first thing is that it says that God did not approve of Cain. So not only God, like, he wouldn't even, like, he could have at least taken Cain's and been like, oh, well, I like Abel's better. He didn't even take it.
No, it doesn't say
It doesn't say he didn't
Why?
take it.
It says he didn't approve.
That
Yeah.
doesn't mean
Or
she didn't
Normally,
take
if
it.
you
Alright, now hold on a
approve
second.
something, you
No, he took
if
it.
you don't approve something, you can't.
All right.
No,
So let's
she took it.
let's at least put down the question that Cooper's raising. I'm just going to use the abbreviation SAC for sacrifice just to save myself some time. Let's go on to the next verse.
Wait, Rabbi, no,
like
I
a
have another
definition
thing.
of
Rabbi, no, I have
No.
another thing.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, I
Remember I
cut you
said-
off. Go ahead.
And then my other thing
All right.
was,
Ari, your classmate's talking,
I don't
please.
know if this helps, but when we
Go
were
ahead.
talking about effort, I looked
Yeah.
it up and it said to grow, like to harvest just wheat, it takes 4 months, but
Yeah.
to make an animal ready to
To sacrifice?
sacrifice, it takes 8 to 12 weeks.
No, but
More
what about
than
get
that.
pregnant?
No.
give
Well, I
birth?
know. I was specifically. Excuse me. You refer. Excuse me. Hold on a second. You're referring.
12 weeks is like 4 months.
5,
Sorry.
4. You're referring to once the sheep's been born, to have it be able to grow to the point where it can even possibly be sacrificed. Is that what you're suggesting? I just want to make sure I understand.
It
Okay.
takes more than
All right.
4 months
So
for
look.
meat to grow.
So look. We can talk about months involved in the process. We can talk about effort.
But he might not have given wheat. Also, could have been like.
We don't know. It could have been some other grain offering. So let's look here.
Wheat is like the grain that's the
Wait, hold on a
fastest
second.
to grow.
It
Um,
takes more than 4 months.
Guys, could you please not have the side to side right now?
To harvest?
Excuse me. Could you not have the side to side right now? Lily, could you please read verse 5?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. But did not approve Cain and his offering. Cain was filled with rage. His face fell.
Okay. Now, his face fell does not mean it like falls off on the ground.
No, but he was like
It's-
disappointed.
It's an idiom meaning he was disappointed. He was upset. Now,
Like a little embarrassed.
Cain was filled with rage. I asked you before to think about how Cain was feeling. The text says Cain was really upset by this. Remember, there's only Cain and Abel as brothers. There's no one else as far as the text is concerned. Might there be? I guess possibly, but at least not in the mind of the text. And again, you guys talked before about effort. It's not like Cain put in 0 effort in giving this sacrifice. And as Ari suggested, he may have even had a hand in indirectly in helping Abel procure his sacrifice. But notice what Cain's reaction is.
Yeah, that's also what
He was filled with rage. I mean, just look at the Hebrew here. In verse 6 it says, at the end of verse 5, it says, El kain ve'el minchato lo v'yichar l'kain ma'od. When if you look in Pasuk Hey at the end of it, when we talk about v'yichar af, literally his nose got hot, that's the biblical idiom for someone getting really upset. When it just says v'yichar, you know that Cain got really upset here. Notice God's response. Miriam, could you please read verse 6 just to start us off?
So the Eternal One then said to Cain, "Why are you so angry? Why has your face fallen?"
Alright, so basically he's
Why
just,
did they call him the Eternal One in this?
this translation, well, but let's see what the Hebrew is. It says Adonai.
Well, he's eternal, I guess.
It could be, he could say God. Sometimes I think they use the Eternal One. Sometimes I think they not mix up, but they switch up translations.
No, because I'm saying because like we haven't really ever seen him in Weapons of the Ring calling him the Eternal One other than this.
Well, again, but the issue is not so much the translation as opposed to what Hebrew words being used. Is it Adonai? Or is it Elohim? So look here for a second. Now, is God telling Cain how to feel?
No.
Is God scolding Cain?
No.
So what tactic? I mean, how is God?
He's warning Cain. He's asking
Could be a
him.
warning. What
He's
else?
asking him why he's
Okay.
angry.
Why he feels that way.
educator's technique.
Why do you feel
Open.
this way?
And did.
An open-ended question doesn't necessarily have a yes or no answer.
Wait, can you like write a lead up to that? So for my
Sure.
notes, like-
Open-ended question, and we're talking about verse 6, okay? An open-ended question is one in which the person who's being asked the question really has to think about, well, how am I going to answer that? You can't use just a yes or a no. That doesn't give an answer. You really have to think about what answer are you going to give to this question? Or you have to give it thought. Now, how many of you at any point in your life have felt really, really angry? Just out of curiosity. Just me.
I
No,
think
okay.
everyone
All right.
left.
So, all right. So a little bit more than half the classes raise their hand. Okay.
Oh,
When
mine's
you're,
also-
if you happen to be very angry, do you think logical, calm thought
No.
is something which comes easily to you?
No.
Okay.
Um,
So, why would God at this moment, when God knows that Cain is filled with rage, why would God ask an open-ended question at that point?
He wants to make him salty.
You want, excuse me?
He wants to make him even more angry.
Oh, you think God's trying to get Cain more angry?
Yeah.
All right, hold on a second.
Looking at
Miriam, what do you think, Lily, you're on deck?
two things.
Big
For-
one.
Well, I think that one of them isn't a thing,
Okay.
but I think that. Wait, what's the question again?
Why is, at this moment, when Cain is so angry, and you guys know from personal experience,
Okay.
when you're angry, you know,
Okay, because like he's probably you know how like we said how like everything is foreseen or whatever.
yes, we use that phrase in
eventually
Pirkei
he
Avot.
kills Abel. So he's saying like, wait, I just lost my train of thought. But maybe he's like trying to ask like that
Okay.
maybe to try to stop that or something
Alright.
like that, or maybe just try to like, okay, that might just forget that maybe, or like just get like just never mind.
I mean, Miriam, if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like you're saying that God understands Cain's mind is moving in a certain direction. And
So
it's
he
almost,
wants to stop it in some way.
okay, it's if God is, by asking the open-ended question, is God saying, hey, Cain, take a chill pill for a
And
second.
the second thing,
Go ahead. I'll get
are
you
you
a window.
recording us because you told them that we're bad kids?
Yes.
Oh, so it's all
Excuse
about
me.
you, is it?
It's all because of me. I'm
Please.
terrible.
Go ahead, please, Lily.
So no.
Guys,
Thank you.
guys,
So,
no worries.
You know how we were reading like the beginning of Genesis when it was talking about like Adam and Eve and how God knew that they would eat the fruit tree? Well, maybe God knew Cain's answer, but he wanted to see if he'd tell the truth when he's so angry.
Is Cain going to be truthful when God asks him the question?
No.
What's the question? Oh yeah, why is your face?
Why are you so upset? Why is your face? No. Understand, this is not the first time this has happened where God asks a question where God really has a pretty good idea of the answer,
Like
but God,
lied.
but God wants to see, is the person going to be truthful and responding to me? God got burned
Adam
once.
and Eve.
God's already been burned by Adam and Eve in terms of not being fully truthful about why they did their actions.
If you play with fire, you get burned.
Okay?
Yeah, Ari.
But it's perhaps God is asking this question because God wants to see, is this going to be what human beings are always going to be like? Never telling the truth. When I ask them a question, I give them a chance to be honest with me?
Pretty much.
Well, hold on a second, but wait a minute. We haven't even seen Cain's response yet.
Can I read verse 8?
Excuse me, we have to do verse 7 because God's still talking. Someone want to volunteer for verse 7?
Oh,
All right, go ahead, Ty.
okay. I thought you were gonna.
You read.
I know. I
Oh, I'm
was
saying,
gonna
I'm
say,
sorry.
I was
Cool.
gonna say
You were
the
gonna say?
question you had. Why he's so upset?
Go ahead, and then we'll go to Cooper to read the verse. Go ahead.
Because it's not just like, for example, if Halela.
Wait, stop.
No, no.
If someone,
It's always a like.
guys,
If Cooper
please
and
don't
I-
use names. It's not nice.
If Cooper and I if Cooper and I both got Halela a gift,
Okay.
and she
Liked
picked
one better.
and she picked Cooper's, that she likes better.
Okay.
I would be upset.
I'm great
But
at
she would also
gift giving.
take yours.
Wait, hold
But
on.
I
Go
would
ahead.
be more upset if it's God. Also, there aren't that many people
interesting.
alive, so well, I mean, God's important, but they
They're
really
like
they really believed in God.
Yes. Okay.
So God is more important than.
Okay.
If Halela was rude about it, I would get revenge.
All right, wait, hold on a second. Come back for a moment. There aren't that many
Slap her
people.
with
Wait,
it.
excuse me. Ty makes some interesting points. Ari, Ty makes some interesting points. There aren't that many people around. God, at least in some, we're assuming in these people's minds, we're more important than other people. But the other thing is, if God doesn't like your sacrifice, and Talia was moving towards this word,
Rejected.
Aww.
there are only 4 people that we know about, and now Cain's feeling rejected by God. That's pretty grim. That's pretty grim.
Can you write grin? Can you write it in black and like with comments
No,
on
it's gonna
it?
be no. That much you can't ask.
Wait, what's the grim goes with rejection?
With rejection, I mean,
Can
there
you
are
write
only,
it in
there are only 4
brothers,
people in all of creation,
Well, not,
and now God is rejecting the sacrifice that one of the 4 of them brings.
That's not nice.
It's nice, as my teacher used to say in middle school. Niceness has nothing to do with it.
well, he's not rejecting it. Well, he is.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
he is rejecting. No, he's
He
not
is rejecting it.
No, he's not.
Totally is rejecting.
He is rejecting it, but he's not necessarily. No, I meant he's not taking it.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. It's
Like in
Go
Talia's
ahead.
example of the Halela gifting, like Halela would take both. Like she like in a
Yeah.
Of course,
normally.
because Halela's polite.
No, she isn't.
Wait, how?
Wait, I'm paying you a compliment.
No, I'm
Whatever.
just wondering how we got back to this.
Okay, so see me. Let's keep on going here. Cooper, could you just read verse 7?
Yes, I can.
First, God asks a question, then God makes a statement. Go ahead.
Would you not do well to lift it? For if you do not do well, sin is a demon at the door. You are the one it caves, and yet you can govern it.
Okay, now hold on a second.
Yeah, see, that's what
Excuse
I'm
me.
saying.
Look at verse 7 in Hebrew.
Can I read it?
Here, it says, if you look at the next to last line, verse 7, Lefetach chatat rovetz. It's literally like sin is like crouching like a lion at the door, ready to pounce at you.
Yeah, great. That's what I was kind of saying, isn't
Go
it?
ahead. Go
Isn't
ahead.
that kind of what I was saying? Like about like God knows that like he's gonna do something bad.
All right, now hold on a second. Let's even go back before. We talked before that people have 2 inclinations.
Oh, good and bad.
Yeah? They have a Yetzer HaTov. And what's the other one? Yetzer Hara. This is in every one of us. And at any given moment, the inclination to do good will either go, yay, I triumph. Or sometimes we do things we know we shouldn't do. Or in retrospect, we look back and say, gee, I really shouldn't have done that. What do you think God is saying about these 2 inclinations to Cain at this moment? Give it a shot.
Well, like he needs to choose between what he wants to go.
And this goes back to the comment Miriam made before, that God probably has a pretty good idea of what sort of thoughts Cain may be forming in his mind about how he's going to deal with his anger. And it's not good. And it's as if God's saying, look, and this goes back to the, if I remember correctly, I think it's a vote 4:15, that everything is foreseen, but let me check that, everything is foreseen, but free will is given. No, that's not it. It's 3:15. I keep on saying 4:15. A mental block, okay?
No.
What it's saying is, we have free will. We can choose. Cain, you got the ability to choose. Think about how angry you are right now, and think about the choices you're considering. God never says, don't kill your brother. God never says, don't be upset. I don't know about you. But some people I know in my life, if you tell them don't be upset, how do you think they might react?
They get
They get
They
upset.
get more upset. It's like, don't tell me how to feel. All right? And yet, even at the same time, God feels like God has to say something, or Cain's going to go down a path for which there is no turning back and will not end well.
Well,
Go
either
ahead.
way-
Wait, hold on. Go ahead, Lily. Your hand was up.
What's that number?
I'm sorry. I'll vote 315.
Okay.
Okay? It's from the Mishnah. I'm sorry. Mary, what you want to ask this,
Well,
please?
either way, he might do. Like he might. Either way, like even if God hadn't,
Right. Even if God had.
he probably still would do.
So think about this.
Maybe.
Cain is angry. Cain is moving in a certain direction. God asks an open-ended question, maybe to try and make Cain think about what he's doing. So if he's going to make a choice, it's not out of anger. It's maybe like, think about what you're thinking of doing, Cain. Is this really what you want to do? How
But
might
God
this?
knew that was going to happen.
All right. It's almost as if God's trying to put a brake on Cain, like rolling towards this action. Remember, we once talked before. I talked lots about the 8th grade in the Holocaust unit. One of the things that your schoolmates are constantly just drives them nuts in the Holocaust unit is like, how could someone do this? It makes no sense. It's not logical. And I keep on telling them over and over again, hate is not logical. It has nothing to do with reasoning. It's an illogical emotion. And here is God trying to get Cain to think about the emotion you're feeling, and hopefully he'll turn back from what he's thinking of doing. And then, of course, so God's basically saying, look, you want to give in to hate? You want to give in to anger? Sure, you can do that. What's it, say it again, Ari?
Join the dark side.
Yeah, excuse me. Funny how certain themes get reused in popular culture. Sure, you can join the dark side, but there's a price to be paid.
Kill your wife.
No, not quite like that, except if you're talking about Star Wars.
His brother.
I was
Kill
talking
your
about
brother.
Star Wars.
Now, is God advocating for Cain to kill his brother?
No. Well, join the dark side.
No.
If you're indicating that.
Look, I'll put up dark side here only because it's a cultural it's a cultural reference, and for some of you that helps to illustrate the point.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, I said for some of you, not
No,
for all.
I know. I mean, for me,
Okay.
whatever.
One of the things to think about when you look at things happening in our society, ask yourself, is someone allowing themselves to be taken over by hate, and that governs their actions?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they doing as God advises? Think about what you're doing, realizing that you're choosing between the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara. Think about the implications of the choice you are about to make. And then ask yourself, is this a choice I want to make? The only way you can deal with something as strong an emotion as hatred is to try and find a way to get someone to stop and think about what they're doing. It doesn't mean the person is always going to make the right choice or to always choose the Yetzer HaTov. I mean, I've been telling my students for years, and Gavin can tell you the same thing. I don't tell you guys what to do, but I work very hard at getting you guys to stop a second and try and think about, what is it you're doing? What are some of the possible outcomes of the choices you're making? So that if you do make a certain choice, you realize it's going to have certain entailments. Certain things may come in its wake as a result. And if you thought about that and you're willing to live with the consequences, then make the choice you want to make. But don't just do something and then think about it afterwards. Pauline, go ahead.
Are there any consequences for eating halal?
For what?
Eating halal.
For eating halala, there are too many bad
We're being
consequences
filmed.
to consider.
Like?
Like, first of all, you would be ending a human life. You would be greatly saddening her family.
And some joke.
At the very least.
Okay.
Yes, and knowing Halayla, she'd give you a giant stomach ache. You said it yourself. I'm only.
I swear.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save these notes. I know you've taken notes during class. I'm gonna print these out and I'm gonna scan them and I'll send them to you. So if you wanna see if you missed something during class, or if something here sparks your thought process.
Should we pack up?
You should pack up and put your chairs up. I appreciate very much how much you listened to each other as we discussed
To
this.
read verse 8.
Say what?
We didn't get to read verse 8.
Oh, boom.
Trust me, I promise you we will get to
Are
it.
we stopping the video?
No.
I have no,
Oh, God, we told
Rabbi,
me
when is
so.
this
Okay.
due?
I'm at the 2 sheets.
Wait.
All right,
Don't make
since-
it due tomorrow.
Since you were not here yesterday, I will let you and Miriam hand them in on Monday. Everyone else needs to have them.